episode, I think 28, New York City Bike Culture. I'll have to edit it if not. After a bit of a summer hiatus and racing has been taken over and life and family. But I'm super pleased to be back here with Cesar Gallego. Cesar, as some people call him here, whatever you introduce yourself as. I think you have probably many names. Just talked a little bit. Native of Queens, New York. Born and raised here, but he said he just added that he spent some time in Colombia, so you can tell us a bit more about that. That's your family heritage, your family's background. Currently races for ButcherBox Cycling in your third year, if we count the Hamper 2020. But that's exciting. It's one of the teams that. What's the official status? It's not continental, right?
We're just a USA Crit D1 team.
Right. So that one of the ones who are on the USA Crit circus that has gotten some attention this year, especially with some added teams and others. But you can tell us more about success there. But you started out riding here. You still ride here quite a bit. Obviously, you train here. You've gone into some coaching. You work in a bike shop, right? You do mountain bike. You were just a track nationals. I saw. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. But he will also show up to the local Randall's Island or Prospect Park races, whatever fits in the schedule, right? So, Cesar, tell us a little bit about how you got into cycling here in New York City. How did that all start? And then take us a little bit on that journey with you.
So I first started as a skateboarder. I was skateboarding a lot. That's what took up most of my time. Was I would get out of school and I'll go skate, and then my friends started getting bikes to get to skate spots and skate parks.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I need a bike. Got a bike. In that process, it was just like a single speed bike, and we were going to skate spots.
It was just too cumbersome to go on the subway or whatever, or it was just like, it was obviously too far to skate or whatever.
Too far to skate. Didn't want to get on the subway sometimes. Either we got to a skate park and we're like, all right, let's ditch this park and go somewhere else, and everybody was on bikes and I wasn't, so I found bikes through there. Eventually I got
so these are BMX bikes or
these are just like single speed whatever beater we can get our hands on.
Nice.
Right. And there was a bike shop down the block from the apartment I grew up in where it was a skateboard shop and a bike shop. And I would always go in there asking for free skateboards.
Yeah.
And eventually they were like, how about you work for a skateboard? And they gave me a job at a bike shop. And awesome. I started just like taking care of the skate section, started working on bikes. And then eventually I got introduced to all types of bikes there.
Yeah.
Eventually I built a bike from the basement, just parted together a bike and just had my own bike. Was still skateboarding pretty heavily. And then I started getting pretty hurt on the skateboard.
Yeah.
And eventually I was just like sitting around, not able to skate because I was hurt. And we started riding bikes everywhere. And then that's how I got into bikes.
So you're the guy in the skateboard videos, like breaking the ankle or all that kind of stuff.
Never broke anything.
Yeah, okay, but hurt enough that you couldn't skate.
Yeah, hurt enough where it's like, tear some ligaments or like strain an ankle too hard. Yeah. And I needed to do something to get out of the house. So friends still had bikes, so I just got on the bike and started riding.
Yeah. So does the shop still exist? The skateboard bike combo is pretty rare, right? I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
I don't think there's that many shops that are doing it anymore. There's a couple, I think, but it's pretty rare now. It's mostly focused just on bikes now, or being a skate shop alone. It's still around. It's in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. From there, I was introduced to all types of bikes. I then got into being like a messenger, like a food delivery guy on the side of the bike shop. Yep. And then that introduced me to like the whole community of like alley cats and like street racing. Okay. Right?
That was your entry. Yeah.
I was pretty bad at that because I never had a sense of direction. I never
that's pretty valuable in the alley cats. You need to know where you're going. Yeah. You can be as fast as you want.
Luckily in a crit, you just stay in the same course and you can always, where you're going 100% of the time. But Yeah, so I wasn't good at that, and you know, that crowd eventually like introduces you to Red Hook or like the track, and I got sucked into that. I did a Red Hook with like zero like racing experience.
So what year are we talking? We're talking the earlier Red Hooks, probably. Right?
We're talking about. It's been a while.
Because like there's like transition into cycling, that was happening and working as a messenger or like a food delivery. That was in high school or what was that?
That was out of high school.
Oh, high school.
Yeah, I think I was like 19, I think, or 18. Way out of high school. Yeah. Pierogies, Mitchell.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
So that was, yeah, it was a little bit after high school. I want to say it was 2014 or 2013.
Yeah. Okay.
2014. It was like the Red Hook that like had hitters. Like
Yeah.
the first year where there was a
getting big.
qualifying.
Yeah. Mhm.
The first year where it was qualifying, and like there was hitters. Like I think that podium ended up being like Evan Murphy, his brother Kyle,
Yeah.
maybe Kyle.
Yeah.
Colin Strickland was on the
Okay.
podium.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Neil Besnick was on the podium.
Yeah, if you don't know all these names, that's okay. But like I think Colin Strickland has gotten a lot of attention recently.
Yeah.
Now with gravel.
Colin
and
Strickland
Kyle
was-
Murphy is
yeah.
still a rally cycling
Yeah.
pro, right? So I mean, which is
But these guys
domestic
were
pro, but these are good
yeah,
guys. I mean,
these are
strong guys.
great, strong guys, and these are guys that like at that moment were probably like just their Cat 1 and racing domestic, right? They were on the verge of like either getting on a continental team or just like
At the beginning of their career.
Yeah, the beginning of their career. And I didn't qualify.
Yeah, well,
right?
yeah, I mean.
I didn't know what I was doing. And then eventually that got me into like the track cycling stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I started going to Casino a lot. Then I did the Red Hook. Then I did the Red Hook Navy Yard one. Where
Okay.
There was a lot of
Yeah.
crashes. And then that just sealed the deal of like just racing bikes all the time.
Yeah,
And getting into it.
Yeah. So that didn't like that challenged you more so than it like disappointed you like not qualifying there at
Yeah.
Red Hook. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think a lot of people show up with the expectation of being able to be competitive, and then they realize like how hard it is.
Yeah, I didn't know. So like at that point of like me riding bikes, like I didn't know what being an athlete was.
Yeah.
I like zero expectations of what athlete was. Like I think like the
You
actual.
haven't done any like endurance sports or anything in high
I
school?
played soccer,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
in high school,
Yeah.
and I skateboarded, and like skateboards never looked at themselves as athletes until now, right?
Yeah,
Until the
right,
last
winning
couple of years
Olympics,
when
yeah.
they're going to the Olympics. I never considered myself an athlete until like 4 or 5 years ago when I was like, oh shit, I have to actually train. I have to actually know what I'm eating.
Yeah,
I have to go to sleep early.
Yeah.
So like at that time I was like, I thought about it as a skill. I didn't think about it as being an athlete, so I was just riding my bike. I didn't know what I was doing.
Well, coming from skateboard, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
You think of it as a skill, and it's all about balance and skills. And
Yeah.
you repeat things, but you're not like. Again, now it's probably different, but you're not necessarily like running or biking a lot to be fit as a skateboarder, right? So
Yeah.
which totally makes sense. So that's Red Hook, which I've talked about this on the show before. Gone for the time being, at least.
Yeah.
You were right away from that, but that brought you into your casino, so more track riding actually. So you had a fixed gear bike, which again probably a cheap entry point into the sport, and then
extremely cheap.
yeah, extremely cheap. Like especially if you get something beater or you buy something like a shop and you work for a shop, you get maybe the leftover frames or whatever. I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but that's a lot easier, and I've heard that story a few times from other people too. It's a great entry point.
It is.
And then, did you work your way up to Casino in terms of like just getting a lot of practice in there, or did you fairly quickly jump into other stuff?
So, after that first racing at Casino, a lot of friends started getting like road bikes.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh damn, I gotta figure this out. I then I talked to the guy that owned the shop, and he was kind enough to let me work off the bike, and I just paid off the bike, and I got like a specialized tarmac.
Nice. Okay.
And then from there, I started like my first road season, and I just, just sucked in.
Yeah.
Just first race, Grants Tomb, off the bat, Cat 5.
That's a tough race to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it has a little bit of up and down. It has a few turns. I think if you knew that downhill into the kind of U can scare you a little bit, when you come with speed, and And then it doesn't help that it's like 1st of March or something. And there's always
It was
like,
freezing cold. Yeah.
It's always freezing cold every year. So
it's one of my favorite races. But yeah, that just started everything. I was able to save up, pay that bike off, and then I started getting into road racing and crits.
Yeah.
I think
and you started training.
when I started, no, I
started riding more.
I think I was just riding more.
Yeah.
I think I was just riding a lot more. I think I considered training like going out over the bridge and like going to the market and like getting food and then coming back.
It
was still more of a destination thing where it's like, all right, I'm gonna grab my bike and ride as far as possible and then come back home and be like, hey, I rode over the bridge today. I went to another state.
You're having fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, you're out there in Queens. That's a far way.
Yeah.
You know? You see a lot of stuff on the way.
Then like I had like this like 3 friends that just like were super into it. We'd go out and ride every morning, or you know, fit it around my work schedule where we'd go out and do big rides. And then we would do the Rockley race on Thursday nights where we like leave super late, go do a 3-hour ride there, and then race and then ride back home. That was actually pretty like good training before I even knew it was training, right?
Oh yeah,
riding to the race and racing and then riding back home. I did not know that was training.
That's at least like 3 hours combined.
So we were doing that. I think I met a lot of people. And they started giving me rides.
I should add real quick. Rockley is like out in New Jersey, so it's like from you're in Queens, Kew Gardens or something like that, where you are. So it's at least an hour from there to get to Rockley. Probably
it's an hour and a half.
Yeah,
an hour 45.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because it's an hour to get to the bridge and then probably 45 minutes to get to Rockley.
Right. Yeah, because it's not right around the corner from there. So, and then you race in an hour, and it's like. It's unfortunately not on this year. I'm hoping it's going to be back next year, but Thursday nights, 6 o'clock or 6:30 or something like that. And it's in this kind of weird, like, little industrial
parking lot of a school.
Yeah,
parking lot of a school or a retirement home, I think.
So, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
And we would race at like 6 or 7, and then we'll race the sun back to make sure that we're in the city by the time we get started. So you were never fully off the gas after the race. You still were on the gas to try to make it back to the city.
Yep. So, sorry, I cut you off there. You were saying you're still riding with those friends?
No, most of those friends like either stopped taking it as serious or like, you know, started doing other things.
Yeah.
I started like, you know, moving up and like figuring out what I had to do to get better. So like I was always on it full gas, and like, you know, the moment I saw somebody veer off, I was like, this is what I like, and I'm gonna stay on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So a couple of friends just stopped doing it, and then I like kept racing and trying to figure it out. And then you meet so many people that you start like getting rides to races and doing more races, and then that just every year you do 2 or 3 new races, and they add to the calendar, and you meet more people, and then you go to the next big race. Right? So that was the thing. I think 2 years after that is when I started taking it serious, and I did like my first training camp where I flew out to LA.
Okay,
and stayed at a friend's house.
You did the New York cyclist thing, which is like a week in LA in January or something like that.
Yeah. So I had a friend that lived out in New York named Austin, and him and his girlfriend got up and left and moved to LA. And they got like a small studio apartment, and he always was like, come out. And then finally I was like, all right, dude, I'm coming out for 2 weeks. Crashed on the floor, trained.
Go do some bike riding.
Super hard, and then came back, and that's what kicked it off. I think that's what was like, all right, I'm gonna do good this year, and I started to just.
So that was what, 2016?
2016,
Okay. I did a little bit of spying on your USA cycling history, and I think some of the results are not there and all that. Yeah. But either way, so that sounded like where you were riding for. That you were on a team. I think you weren't attached at that point already, right? But then I'm trying to think of what team that was.
I was riding for Kind Human Pactimo at that time. Yeah, it was before Fifth Floor.
It was before Fifth Floor. That was, I think, the year I kind of saw you the first time in a kid. You were already up to with
I was either at that point. I was a 2 at that point. Yeah.
Okay.
When I got on Fifth Floor, I was a Cat 2. But the year before, I was on Kind Human, just traveling to races and getting myself to races to get my Cat 2. I had really good support on the team. There was a guy named Matt Urchel.
Yeah.
He was from New York.
Yeah.
He did a lot, and he always just like, he would show me all these races outside of like New York City.
I was gonna say, so when you say traveling, like were you're talking, not talking rock play, you're probably talking further than Somerville still, or are you talking
further than Somerville?
Yeah.
Intelligentsia Cup.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking proper travel.
Yeah. Intelligentsia
not
Cup.
the day trip for a couple hours.
Yeah. Intelligentsia Cup, and I think some like dumb stage race in Virginia where like I thought it was going to be super exciting, but I realized that day that stage racing was not it. It was not it.
But
the
you have
travel
to try
was
to
fun.
know. Yeah, you have to try it out to know. You go, all experience is fun, but once you have a road race that's real hard, and then the time trial that you may not have a time trial bike for, other people have the time trial bike and all that.
Yeah, the stage race was not fun. But yeah, he like opened up this door of like, all right, there's all this other racing, there's all this training that you can do, and you know, get yourself to it and race and have fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, he like showed me cyclo-cross. He showed me that. He supported me a good amount, and you know,
a good mentor there. Yeah.
We went out and we raced as much as we could. And that year, I ended up getting my Cat 2 at the end of the year. Yeah, 2016 or 2017, those 2 years. And then after that, fifth floor came with we had race fifth floor a bunch that year at park races where they were actually pretty good that year, where they had a lead out train going for like a Cat 3 team.
Yeah, okay.
I think Dave Hull was winning most of the races. Chris Pino was like in second, but they had like a legit lead out train for a Cat 3 team at a park race, right? And I remember one day they had a really good lead out train. I ended up coming around and winning the race, and then from there it was like, hey, we want you on the team for the following.
Right.
And I was like, sick, let's do it. And it ended up being a really, really good team.
Yeah.
Some of the best kids I rode in. Great people to ride with.
Yeah.
I think we did a training camp in LA, all of us together. And then we came back and we crushed it that year. Really good at 2017.
So that was 2017.
Yeah.
And at that point, so you've tried cross already, you've done track, like I feel like you've got a real proper cycling education, but just by like having fun with it, kind of like not so like in a super focused, I want a junior development team kind of thing, right? No, this was more you like really being into it and having maybe the right people around you and find the right people.
Yeah, it was me being really into it and figuring out a way to do everything and experience everything just because I loved it so much, right? Like it got me out of.
You like more culture?
Yes, please. Thank you.
It introduced traveling to me, right? Yeah. Like before, like the furthest place before bikes, like the furthest place I'd gone to was like LES skate park.
Right.
And then the bike started like, I can go over the bridge and do this. Oh, I can get in a car with friends and go race in a different state. And like that stuck to me, and I was like, oh damn, this is like showing me a lot more than just bikes. Like they're showing me all these places. And yeah, I think that's what just got me motivated to just get out more and do more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a typical New York City story too, right? Where I think if you're in New York, there's so much going on, and it's just big too, right?
Yeah.
And to some extent, you're probably stuck with the subway grid, especially when you're you know older, not that old, or you don't have a car, which you know like a lot of New Yorkers don't and don't need for the most part. But what you're mentioning is like you can't really leave the city then, and a lot of New Yorkers don't or don't do regularly because. In some ways, it's easier to stay, and it's also from a cycling perspective super easy to stay because, like, in a year like this one, it's great. And other years, sometimes it can be like tie you in a little too much, where you're racing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday in the city, and you're never seeing anything else, and you only know how to race these 3-4 courses, which again is super convenient. I wouldn't complain about the availability, but it is a little bit one-dimensional to some extent, right? Especially if you're trying to develop yourself as a bike racer, and go into these places like. It's going on right now, Intelligentsia Cup, right, where you have a different course every day, and they're all gnarly, and there are holes, and they're like you have to figure out the turns like on the fly on that day, you know, and if you're done by the end of the race, you're not going to compete, and you're going out. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but those next experiences you had, but it's awesome that it gave you like more than just the cycling part, but you saw other places and you got out, and I think that's really an awesome story as well. So. Also part of the story. On that note, like before we maybe go into the next, I think the natural transition, start talking about how you got the ButcherBox, but maybe like let's take a step back. So that sounds like a pretty smooth progression. Was that always like really just your kind of your motivation and your drive, and then obviously the connection with the bike shop was probably really good because it allowed you to get like basically buy a bike kind of on credit free on work, which so you don't have to fork over like $3,000, cash on your own at that point.
That was
put on the credit card. Yeah, exactly. So right, I mean, for a young guy out of high school, it's a lot more affordable that way, right? And it sounds like you didn't have like the person who would just like hand you a bike and say race it and like drive you to the races. You all kind of figured out yourself. You were on manager and you're on coach and your own. With some support.
Yeah, I never like let certain things like define it. I was just like if I struggle to get something, I figured out a way to get it. Right? Like, all right, I worked at a bike shop, so I knew that obviously you work at a bike shop, you'll get hooked up, and you talk to the right people, they'll help you out, right? And like you show off that you're like that you're gonna work hard for it, and that's not just gonna be handed to you, right? So like I went out and I did the thing, and I like showed that it was worth it to myself and to other people, and it paid off. So I was really lucky to have that and those people around me.
Was that coincidence that you met the right people? Do you think the community here is generally welcoming, or was it that you're a nice guy and everybody likes you, or what is it like? What do you think is your experience the average experience, or
I don't know if it's the average experience. I just know that I made it happen somehow. And I figured out a way to do it. The community out here is pretty welcoming. I wouldn't say it's not welcoming, but also stuff isn't just handed to you. Right. I think New York does lack a lot of development. In a sense of bringing up people. Juniors, juniors are like slightly above juniors,
that's right? Under 23 or whatever.
I mean, so like, I was considered old, I think. Even though I was only 2021. And like, I didn't show like this crazy amount of talent or like genetics where I was like, oh, this kid's gonna make it. Here's this, right?
Like you said, you didn't show up to your first Advanced 2 and just crush everybody, but you were off the back.
But there's still this like lack of development where it's like you see this kid and you're like, people are not coming up to you and say like, hey, do you have a team? Or like, hey, do you need help? Or like, it's like you show up and you're on your own half the time, right? I was never approached by a team or by like a development team at 20 to 23 to say like, hey, we can help you out, do this, this, and this. It was
arguably that doesn't even exist here, right? I mean, if you're not like getting put into a junior team by mom and dad, kind of,
exactly.
Which you have like Star Trek and you have Cuevas and Brands Cuevas and you have, I guess, the CRCA Development Foundation team. That's it, right? I mean, what else is there after that?
Even those teams are like, I don't think they're really developing or looking. I mean, some of them are. I'm not gonna speak bad on them because they are developing. I just don't see it as much.
I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying? I think it'll be critical, even though they're doing work, right? I mean, So, tell us your perspective. I think we can spend a little bit more time on that because I think so. They are clearly, they have juniors and they're working with them. But your point is more that they don't have the visibility and they don't have the reach in terms of like getting to other people that aren't like signed up for them already, kind of.
And they don't seem that reachable. You're right.
They're not that present in the community.
I mean, I was 20 to 23, and like I was never approached by CRCA junior development. Right. And it says junior, but up until 23, you can still develop somebody.
I think it's officially an under 23 team at the moment.
You can develop somebody after 23, right? Like,
absolutely.
But like I was never, there was never like a conversation or like a talk about it, right? And like I'm not saying like I was worthy of that, but like you see kids.
If there was a pipeline that you could kind of see, or if the clubs would reach out more actively.
And like the friends I was riding with were also my age, right? And we were, I want to say we were winning stuff, but we were like top 10ing stuff, and there was never that like conversation with somebody of like, hey, we can get you there, like, we can do this for you, or like making it even easier about like teaching me how to train, or like like if I would knew what an athlete was at like 19, it'd be very different, right? And I think New York City lacks that. Yeah, they have the Star Trek programs, Quaveless and all that. And like they do get kids on bikes and like do that, but like I just don't see them, doing more, reaching out to people to like, eventually have more people on the team. Right?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think all the other teams or clubs, or whatever you want to call them, same problem, right? I mean, you put a lot of pressure on those 2 or 3 junior teams to do all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And most of the like racing teams, they kind of wait until you're a Cat 3 or something, and then you're like, now you get some good results, and now everybody wants to pick you up and wants to be like, and when you're already developed, sort of, And I think I'm 100% with that. I think that's the wrong approach. Like it's like, and not every team can be a development team, and not every team has made a capacity for that, but I think there needs to be more of that, picking people up earlier and like helping them, like rather than letting them figure out on their own and crash 20 times and then
exactly. Yeah. I mean, so you have there's kids around. I mean, there's nobody in New York that has like gone pro in a while.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like actual pro.
Yeah.
Like Tom Murphy and Evan Murphy are like the last. They were on Foundation a couple of years ago.
Yeah, were they New York City guys though?
They were New York City guys.
Well,
no, so they were like West Coast guys, but then they moved out to the city.
It's a little more complicated. Okay,
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but like they were still they were still based out of New York.
Yeah, they were like they came out of here. Okay.
Good, I want to say they were based out of New York and they came out of here, but they're not necessarily from here.
Yeah.
Well, like I think like those are the only 2 names that come up to my head that like are like that made it or figure out a way how to live in New York and like be pros, right?
Other than that, you have to go back to Hincapie, and we're probably missing out on somebody, but it sounds like those are names that come to my mind, and I'm having a hard time. And we can argue and talk about like some of the Caribbean talent, some of the Central American talent that has come through New York and then gone other, like how much did they make it because of New York City, or was this just like a stopover kind of?
But then you look at places like around T-Town, like around the track, and you have Olympians and you have World Cup riders for the track, right? You look at like South Carolina or North Carolina, and you just have like that whole Hincapie development team, right? Like there's like this whole Massachusetts has a jam fund that produces.
There
like,
are certain hubs,
yeah, and like I don't understand how New York doesn't have that with all like the resources and like the diversity in the community. Like there's so much like.
And we have a track.
We have a track. We have tons of bike racing.
Yeah.
Like we have so much bike racing.
Yeah.
We could have like 3 or 4 years ago, you could race 4 times a week, 3 times a week, right?
Yeah.
And
maybe you can again next year. Yeah.
And the fact that we lack a junior team that's really developing riders like that in the city just kind of sucks.
Yeah. So I'm 100% with you. I think I often describe like racing in New York City. Like I said, for racing is great. You can race a ton. And you can race against some good riders. You included, other people included. I think there's some very strong riders here. But it's a scene that is different from other scenes in that you don't see those like juniors or other riders coming through or the pros coming to race here because it's a little bit more cut off from the rest in some ways. It's its own kind of microcosm, and I think the lacking development is part of that. And it's hard to pinpoint. Maybe it is that there's not enough of those structures there. But you're right. I mean, talking about other people too. There's so many million people living here. So many of like the classic like would work their way up kind of stories that would fit the bill of becoming really good cyclists or whatever sport really. And you have them on other sports, but it's not happening here. I don't know if there's too many other distractions and what it is. And a lot of kids, I think, like you, they get into cycling at that age of late high school, college maybe, after high school, and then the traditional programs are looking at them as too old, right? And they're like, nah, that's too late, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I thought all the time, I was like, oh, I'm too old. And that always held me back a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I always wanted to go to like U23 Nationals.
Yeah. And
I was like 21, 22, and I was just starting to get good, and I was like, oh, I'm too old. I'm too slow because I'm too old or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, I did let that affect me for a while. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go out to bike racing and do as much bike racing as possible.
Yeah.
And learn as much as I can and then get good at it if I can.
You got pretty good at it. And you got picked up. Was was that 2018, 2019 was your first full season on ButcherBox, which at the time was still kind of a rising team, right? I want to say like it's gotten better still in terms of the squad. I would say in terms of the names, in terms of maybe the results don't always show that, but I think it was like Chris has got a little bit more competitive, which is a good thing probably. So how did that happen then? Because you were at the time 24 probably or something like that.
I was 24.
So again, a little bit on the older side, like you're a Cat 2. ButcherBox is really more of a New England. I'll leave the last one. Thank you. It's really more of a New England team, right? In terms of who rides on there, although of course there's
we're super spread out.
Yeah, people are spread out, but I think historically speaking, in terms of the leadership, it's a New England
started.
kind of
It
team, right?
started in Boston. Yeah.
Right. So how did you get on there, and how's that been? How did that happen? Are you happy with the development for yourself there, your own personal things that you've accomplished?
So, 2018, I had gotten my Cat 1.
Mm-hmm.
I was riding for Fifth Floor.
All right.
They were able to like get me to bike races, and I was able to get my Cat 1.
Mm-hmm.
I was still new to that elite level, pro level.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, all right, I need to go to bigger races now. Fifth Floor got me to go to Oklahoma Pro-Am Classic the weekend before Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know Tulsa yet, so I was like, I'm going to go to this one before Tulsa.
Probably a good choice, actually.
Yeah. So I went to Oklahoma City, and I saw, and ButcherBox was there.
Yeah.
Spencer, a friend of Iran, that's not on the team anymore, and Steve Cullen, like the manager. And I showed up by myself. I actually showed up with a friend that used to live in New York, Ryan Hobbs.
Okay.
And we went to race, and we raced, and I got my teeth kicked in because Hank Cappy showed up.
The 1-2 race.
Yeah. Hank Cappy showed up, and they lined it up at the front with like their best guys. And it was just strung out half the time. It was like my first like legit, and everybody was like peaking for Tulsa, so it was really fucking. It was so hard. That went really rough. I then came back to New York, just a little sad and depressed, and I was like, damn, this sucks. I just flew across the country just to get my teeth kicked in, and then a couple races went by, and then Ted and Steven Ramirez, Ted Horowitz, messaged me and asked if I wanted to guest ride for Somerville. I then asked for Floor, so it was good to go. I went to Somerville and lined up with ButcherBox, and no, it wasn't Somerville. I'm sorry. I met them at Somerville, and they asked me to guest ride for Harlem Skyscraper, 2018. And it was a UFC Crit that year. I went to Skyscraper. I ended up getting like 16 or 15.
That's solid. USA Crit.
With the USA Crit. And I think I got them a good amount of points for the team overall that year. And they were pretty happy about that. And I was like, wow, this is it. And I started, like, stuff started clicking. I then went to Intelligentsia, raced super hard at Intelligentsia against some big fields. Came back, and I thought I was done, like, for the year. And then I got another message saying, hey, if you can get yourself to Gateway Cup, we'll cover the rest. Got myself to Gateway Cup. And,
meaning, like, if you can show up there, we'll make sure you have a place to sleep. And, so now we're talking the pro life, the American Cup scene.
If you can
get yourself to places.
If you can get yourself there, we can figure out the rest. Me, like, always figuring it out.
It's like, this is my thing. All
right, I'm gonna show up, and I showed up. I got my hand.
So Gateway Cup is St. Louis, we should say that. We're just, so you can't like just like show up there right from here. So it's you flew out there. I'm assuming?
I flew out there.
Didn't ride out there.
I think I like borrowed the bike bag. Got myself out there.
Put it together. That's September now, so that's like the kind of one of the last big races of the season. Usually that's Labor Day weekend, right? It's another proper like crit weekend, like 4 days or whatever, right?
It's the contract weekend.
It's contract talks. Okay, all right. So
contract
you're like,
weekend.
Okay.
Because
did you know that at the time?
No, everybody goes to that race. Everybody goes to that race to secure a contract. So everybody goes out there to race their face off.
All the teams are there still.
Get a result and be like, hey, this is my result for the year. I just went out there because I was like, all right, they said that I can race for them. They got me a spot. This is great development. Boom. Flew out there, got there. When I got there, met some of the guys, and then all of a sudden it was like, hey, we're filming this thing. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, we're filming this documentary with this guy. And I was like, oh, that's kind of tight. And then I got sucked into the American Crit number one as a guest rider. And I was like, oh, this is tight.
Yeah.
I got 20th the first night.
Again, solid. Yeah.
Yeah, it was hitters, dude.
Yeah.
And I was really happy with that 20th.
Yeah, we're going to put that into perspective a little bit in a second here. So, but yeah.
Really happy with that 20th. I think Ty Magner was there.
It was just won the overall agency.
Yeah. It was a big. That for a while. Yeah, it was a big field, and that night race, it's like 32 miles an hour, 4 corners. There was like 3 crashes with 5 laps to go, and I just navigated through that shit.
For you. Yeah.
So finished that weekend. I did crash on like day 3. It was all banged up.
Yeah.
Then a couple months went by, and they hit me up and was like, hey, would you like to ride for us? This is that. We're putting together a pretty good team for 2019. You know, we want to offer you a spot. And I was like, yeah, let's go, let's do this. And then they started releasing the names, and I was like, what am I doing on this team? Like, I did not deserve to be on this team. Like, these are just hitters. And then it just kicked off. We like went to team camp in Savannah, Georgia.
This is 2019 now.
And then we started banging out USA Crit races. I got to do Athens for the first time. Athens
big race in Georgia, kind of the classic, one of the classic crits in the US.
It's Crit World Championships, I think.
It used to be part of a whole week. I think that's currently not a week, but it's a big race. A lot of I think those in the scene, they talk about Athens usually as maybe the premier one in some ways. I mean, I think Tulsa has a special meaning to a lot of people too, but a lot of people talk about the crowds at Athens.
It's just it's a college town, so you have all these people that are not into cycling just come out, line up 4 in a row, and just bars open, just drinking, yelling. It's it's a tunnel of just yelling and yelling. One of the hardest races I've ever done in my life. And then after that, we started, the team just bonded. All the guys became really good friends. It wasn't one of those teams where you showed up and you didn't like the dude. It was one of those teams where like, that's my boy, like that's my friend, and we're gonna go out there and race super hard for each other. And we ended up coming away with the team overall title in 2019.
So it's a big accomplishment. That was, I think, a big feature kind of in that. You already mentioned the documentary, American Crit Life, what's called, right?
American Crit 1 and then American Crit 2.
2, and they're on YouTube, right? And I'll link to those. But you feature both of them, I think, correctly, and then you win the overall as a team, the second, so 2019.
2019, we won the team overall.
Which is big for again, like a squad that, I don't know if it's inside to all the budgets, but I'm gonna say you're not the biggest budget in the squad.
Definitely not the biggest budget,
and not the biggest name squad either, and definitely weren't at the time, I think.
There was a lot of guys that were like on the verge of retiring, right? We had Connor, who had come off like a UCI pro team.
So there's Connor Sally, right? You mentioned names a little bit because I want to make that clear a little bit too. I think a lot of people will not necessarily know these names, but I think if you know a little bit, and this is, I think, that stage in between, like what we might call the proper pros who race over in Europe, right? That people know, and even that people only know if they race a tour off, right? But if you're not really into it, then, or if you're not really following the USA Crit scene, then you may not know everybody, but a guy like Connor, who has tremendous results for somebody who's not a pure sprinter, right?
He still has a kick.
He still has a. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't. Obviously, he would smoke me every time, but he's not the glorified kind of sprinter, right? A la like the Williams brothers or Ty Magner, whoever. He needs maybe a little bit of a different scenario, but still he's getting a lot of good results with what he has. And you mentioned he had been on like that kind of, you can't quite make it the full pro, like get to the world technical level, the full Conti level, but one of those guys who've been on that in-between stage and like a really good bike racer, right?
Yeah, no, so he had a pro license.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
but I mean, he never made it to Europe, that kind of story. Maybe he was there.
He went to Belgium.
Yeah. I think the point is that these are the guys that people don't know but are super strong.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's the point where like they're just showing up at a local print and like, oh, this is just another guy, and you're like, no, this is like more than just another guy. He's like a dad, and like, no, this is something different, right?
Yeah.
This is a guy who trains 20 plus hours a week and all that. You know?
He showed up to 2018 Grand Tomb and like won every premium and wiped the floor.
Yeah.
I think he won that year.
No, I remember when I was in a position to see him jump, and nobody else had anything.
Yeah.
I think, and it was purely because he was just better than everybody else, not because he had the best sprint. It's one of those where he was jumping and everybody else was like looking at each other like, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was convincing for sure. But so you have Connor on there, and I think a lot of people don't know all the other names. Maybe not. They know a little bit through the documentary too, a little bit. But did you fit in? Do you feel like you fit in? Like, I think Connor is kind of the guy to show up. I'll take a little bit more coffee and more water to you. He's kind of the guy that, I don't know, is he kind of the figurehead of the team? Would you say that? Or is he the well-known guy on the team now? Or is it a little bit more balanced nowadays?
I think there's a good balance.
Yeah.
I think everybody, I'm good, thank you. I think everybody on the team is capable of winning a bike race on the day.
Yeah.
Connor is definitely one of the best guys on the team.
Yeah.
But everybody's well known. John Harris could ride a breakaway any day of the week.
Yeah.
Sam can sprint. Adam can ride a break.
Yeah.
It's like all these guys they're all built to win, and they all can win.
You can go to the roster on the website. I don't know. We don't have to name all the names and all the details.
It's well-rounded now.
Yeah.
At first, there was a lot of like imposter syndrome. Just straight up like.
Well, so that was my next question. Like, if you see that guy on the team, right, and you're like, oh, he's on the team, and I'm supposed to ride here coming out of. I mean, again, you had raced in Italy and you raced some races, but you were probably still feeling as like a New York City amateur kind of rider, right? I mean, I don't know how you were feeling for yourself. Imposter syndrome would probably suggest that you weren't feeling like you were on the same level. It's like, were you accepted? Did you feel like you had something to prove? Do you feel like you showed up at a team camp and you're like, I have to hang with them on every climb? Or how was that?
There was definitely a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of like thinking I had to prove myself, right? Because you go into it and like, you know, results on paper aren't as good as their results on paper, but you know, I can ride the race like they can, right? Or like not necessarily like, I don't have 1,000 matches like they do. I have a couple matches, or I can navigate a finish pretty well, right? And like, but their results on paper are significantly better than my results on paper, so I had to like show that like, hey guys, you can believe in me or trust me, and I'm gonna ride for you guys as hard as I possibly can. Like every time I line up, I'm gonna give you my all, right? But there was a lot of like, am I good enough? Should I be here? Am I wasting my time training this hard to like make it? There's a lot of that, and I think there still is. You know,
right, because I mean, if you're Connor, right, you've ridden on whatever pro Conti team, and you've been at a high level, and here's a guy he's probably never heard of, right? He's like, oh, this is Cesar from New York, and you're like, it's different than if you tell him, oh, here's this guy who was on this other pro Conti team or who raced for Hincapie or was on this development team. You'd immediately like, okay, this guy's good enough for me to sit on his wheel and I can trust him, right? And for him to be able to trust you, it probably takes a little bit longer, and I think in some ways it's understandable that you felt like you had to prove yourself a little bit.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a big learning curve and a big a lot of like banging my head against the wall. Right. Just like that was technically my second year as like an elite bike rider.
Right.
2019.
Right.
Second year, and I was going to all these brand new races, like courses that I've never been to.
Right.
Doing tactics that I've never did. You know, putting out power that I've never had to do. Just because I've like raced completely different my whole life.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like you go from not doing anything in a bike race for the last 5 minutes to like I have to either ride the front or ride the lead out train. And like panicking if I'm riding hard enough in the lead out train. If I'm doing the lead out train properly. So there's a lot of that and like a lot of like, am I good enough? Am I wasting my time? back and forth just because it was my second year.
Yeah. You want dessert?
I'm good, man.
I'll take a. Do you have regular desserts again, or just?
We have all except some of them, like banana cream pie we don't have. But we have honey cake instead, double crumb,
Do you have
cheesecake.
the coochie?
Or
Okay, you got that. I'll take the cheesecake.
Cheesecake?
Yep. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, so there was a lot of that, like just banging my head against the wall.
Yeah.
Because I've never done team tactics up until that year.
Well, you didn't have to, right? And I
Yeah.
think we always talk about that too. Unless you reach like 1-2 level, like here, you don't really have to worry about it. Depending on the team you're on,
Even then,
you don't really have
Yeah.
to. Like, I mean, we're talking about guys who have gotten some of the best results over the last years, or consistently plays well, like you.
Yeah.
If you go to local race, you don't usually have support. You have what's his name currently here too, Matt who rides for ButcherBox too, but you're only 2. It's not like you're gonna ride significantly differently than if you were on your own. Like, but you have guys like Stalin for Jordy usually does have more than 1 or 2, and he keeps getting good results, right? If you know what you're doing,
Well, that's the
and
style.
you have a good sprint, right?
Yeah, that's the style of bike racing I taught myself was lining up and out racing everybody instead of like being a straight up powerhouse where you ride off the front, right? Like I had to figure out a way to like beat everybody without having the huge engine, right? So I taught myself how to treat it like a skill, navigate the race, read the race.
Yeah.
And then I had to switch that. And be like, all right, now I have to race the race 70 or 90 minutes, right?
Yes.
And it's very different.
Yeah.
It's very different. And when you're doing it with 6 guys and you're talking to each other, it's even more different.
But you have a very different role most of the time too. Your role is not to be there. Let's say even if depending on what your role is, you don't have to even be there the last 10 minutes, right? Your role is done before then, and the goal is that you have absolutely exhausted yourself until then, right? And thank you. And that's a very different. I think you're right that you teach yourself something different here, but I think that's really important to teach yourself too, right? That you race differently and don't just race like try to rip everybody's legs off all the time, but then you have to learn to race at that other level. So maybe before we take a break, talk a little bit about the difference between, like, let's say Prospect Park or even Reynolds Island.
Okay.
And then going into, you're going to be a little, which is in Colorado, right? Like, or Athens, or one of your first experiences there in Oklahoma. I would probably say there's like 2 levels, at least one big jump between that and like what we have here, probably 2 levels between that and that kind of the fast US increments kind of thing, you know?
There's that.
But let's break down a little bit what makes it different. Like what to you makes it different when you line up at Prospect Park, let's say Saturday, versus you're gonna line up at Little, which is it's not that just that you start at 6 a.m. versus you start at 10 p.m. So
the biggest difference is I show up to Prospect at the start line at 70 BPM, 60 BPM.
Yeah.
Just breathing, nose breathing. You show up Littleton, you look over and you see Legion, you look on the other side, you see Best Buddies, and you're like, oh, it's gonna be a rough day at work. So I mean, you come out to the local race and you know the same 10 guys. They're gonna win the race. That can win the race. You know the same 10 guys that can win the race, and after that, it's just you're playing a game with them, right?
You can ignore everybody else to some extent. I mean, we're exaggerating a little bit, but it's sort of like that.
You show up and you know the same 10 guys. You know how they're gonna ride, and it comes down to the same 10 guys all the time. You show up to a national level race and 150 guys can pedal as hard as you. 50 guys are gonna fight you at the end. And then 5 guys are going to win the bike race.
And that's why I always say, like, the top, like, people don't understand that the top 20 at, like, is a legit result this year in crits, you know? Because, first of all, just don't get dropped, first of all, as an accomplishment. Second, then, is, like, you have to stay out of all the crashes, which is luck, too, but some skill and positioning and all that. And then, once you're in a position in one of those last laps, that's where you are, you know? And, like, maybe you're going to make up a little bit, and maybe somebody else is going to be done, but for the most part, getting a top 20 is really a big accomplishment. Like, especially when you're maybe one of the major teams where you're going to get a full lead out that brings you there, right? So, but I mean, keep talking a little bit more about the difference. So, you're more relaxed here. You know that 10, 15, whatever, but smaller number of guys to watch. You know that some people won't be able to drive the pace, right? Or you can let them in a breakaway, and maybe they're going to get lucky because of some of the strong guys with them, but probably not going to make it. There, 150 guys line up. Everybody wants to be in the top 20.
Can pedal really hard. Yeah.
Everybody can pedal super hard. Yeah.
150 guys that can pedal really hard. 50 guys that know how to position themselves really well.
yeah.
And then the top 20 who's going to fight for that. You know, the top 20 who's going to fight for top 10. And then the top 5 is going to fight for the win, right?
Yeah, right.
So there you're every mistake is in place, I think. Every risk has a good reward, but the risk is insanely high.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like you said, 2 notches higher.
Yeah.
Right? Where
it's not just 1 notch. I think
it's 2 notches higher because there you have to be thinking about like 10 moves ahead of you. You have to be looking for like patterns. You have to be looking for every inch that you can get because it's going to matter at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Versus here, I can let something go or like lose 10 spots and I'll be around first in the next corner. Right? So I mean that's the biggest difference. And everybody knows how to race at a USA Cruise. Well, like the top 50 know how to race at a USA Cruise.
And I think it's, again, you're much more experienced with that than I have, but I think the kind of the last lap at Prospect Park, or the last time up the hill, it gets kind of tense and everybody's fighting for position, gets nervous, and people take crazy lines and you have to kind of put the elbows out. But that's every lap in USA Cruise, right? I mean, that's the thing. Every turn is like that, not just the last time up the hill, because until then, if you're in good shape, you can kind of relax at Prospect and you're just kind of sitting there and you're moving around freely. And like you said, if you lose 20 spots here, you'll make it up somewhere. It's fine.
The surprising thing is that the last 5 laps of the USA Cruise is the safest place in the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the speed is so high that you're not moving up.
Yeah.
You're not,
if it's high, right? It's like exactly.
If the speed is high enough, you're not moving up, and that's probably the position you're going to get at the end, unless you have a crazy kick, or unless you take a risk that's going to either end you or push you forward, right? So the last 5 laps of the USA Cruise are actually extremely safe compared to the last half a mile at Prospect Race.
Because when we go all of a sudden 20 across the hill, 20 wide, and everybody thinks they have it.
20 wide, everybody thinks they have it, and then one guy sits up, and you're just like, going around trying to figure it out. Versus the USA Cruise race, they parked it at 35, and that's the last 5 laps, and you either have the strength.
You just hang on, right? Nobody comes over the top.
You either have the strength to slightly move up 1 or 2 spots, or you have the cornering skills to come under a couple of guys and move up. But even then, it's extremely hard.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break. I want to talk a bit more. I got to push the battery. But I want to talk a little bit more about that stuff.